Boxing Truth here. I want to talk a little bit more about Chris Eubank Jr. as there's more details coming out on his next fight. Also, the plans he has for the middleweight division if he gets past his next assignment on June 25th for his first fight under his new promotional agreement with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. Now, this agreement he's just recently signed with Eddie Hearn is similar to his past agreement with Eddie Hearn, pretty much a short-term deal. He's only signed for 2 fights, as the Eubank Jr. and his father, they want Eddie Hearn to prove his worth. Can he deliver the big fights to Eubank Jr.? Can they get him the opportunities and the type of fights that he needs in order to take his career to the next level? So they only committed to a short-term deal, 2 fights, which is surprising, considering Eddie Hearn in the past has stated that he's only interested in a long-term deal with Eubank Jr., but this shows he believes in the potential of Eubank Jr., his popularity, the market value that he could bring, and also a potential for great big fights down the line. So it's too hard to pass up on a relationship and a promotional agreement with Eubank Jr. So we'll see what this relationship leads to. Will it lead to a fight with Triple G? And that's what the Eubanks have committed to. They've committed to a fight with Triple G sometime down the line, probably at the end of this year. The Eubank Jr. and Sr. are very confident in their abilities, in Eubank Jr.'s abilities in winning that fight. They actually think Golovkin will not take the fight, but that remains to be seen. As for Eubank Jr.'s next fight, he's going to be fighting a fighter named Tom Duran, a guy I never heard of. He's British level, a guy I pretty much expected in my previous video about Eubank Jr. and his next fight. He's undefeated, 17-0, 7 knockouts, rated in the top 50 according to BoxRec. He's definitely no world beater though. He's beaten no one of note. He's fought very weak opposition, carefully selected, hand-picked foes. He's coming off a knockout win, but he's one-dimensional, nothing special, no special effects, flat-footed, has slow feet, plods forward, not very athletic, not particularly that fast. Chris Eubank Jr. should make easy work of Tom Duran. This is the type of opponent that he's been fighting recently. One-dimensional, come forward, aggressive guys, but are not particularly fast, not that athletic, can't punch off angles, can't punch while moving. But I believe this Tom Duran is even a level below than the 2 most recent opponents of Eubank Jr., and that's Spike O'Sullivan and Nick Blackwell. I mean, those guys have similar styles to Tom Duran, but in my opinion, those guys were even stronger and even tougher compared to this Duran dude that Eubank Jr. is going to be fighting. So I think Duran's even a level below. It's a showcase bout. It's a fight designed to make Eubank Jr. look good in, and he's definitely gonna look good in this fight. I mean, you could just tell when you watch footage of Duran the style that he brings. It's gonna be an action fight for however long it lasts. Eubank Jr. will be able to outbox, able to use his skills, his superior speed, athleticism, and he's the much stronger fighter. He'll be able to land his trademark combinations and be able to explode and look good, and most likely perhaps score a sensational knockout that will further create intrigue to the fans and wanting to see him in a big, significant fight in the near future. And that is the plans. That is the plan in the works, as Eubank Sr. has it all mapped out. He wants Eubank Jr., he wants his son to defend the title, the British title, against Tom Duran, then perhaps to return in August for a quick turnaround, stay active, get another opponent in, and then look for a big fight at the end of this year. And they have committed to a fight with Triple G. They're saying that they're not scared, that while everyone's avoiding the fight, looking for other plans, even handing down belts to avoid Triple G, that Eubank Jr. will step up to the plate if when the opportunity presents himself for a fight with Triple G. Eddie Hearn has already stated that he's already in talks with Tom Loeffler about a potential fight between Eubank Jr. and Triple G. That's a tremendous matchup, a great fight. It's a fight I don't think Eubank Jr. is ready for right now, but if he gets presented with the opportunity later in the year, it's too much to pass up an opportunity. Considering everything that he said about the fight against Golovkin, that he doesn't feel he's invincible, that he's not what people say that he is, and that he feels he could beat him, that he has a style to beat him. Well, I know for one thing, Eubank Jr. has the style to make it a hell of a fight, the type of fight that will have you on the edge of your seat. So I will only hope that fight could happen one day, perhaps at the end of this year. There's other options, though, for Eubank Jr. There's also the rematch with Billy Joe Saunders, but considering his new promotional agreement with Matchroom Boxing and Eddie Hearn, and he has the Sky Network platform, and also Saunders is a Queensberry Promotions fighter fighting under Frank Warren and the Box Nation banner. It just makes the fight difficult to make, but it's a big fight, a fight that's demanded by the UK boxing public. So I don't know the political divides and networks, but perhaps the fight's big enough for it to offset those issues. I mean, Eddie Hearn was just recently talking about this with Kuden Cassius. He says, other than Crolla Flanagan, what other fights is affected by networks and rival promoters? Well, this is another one right here. The Chris Eubank Jr. Billy Joe Saunders rematch. That's a fight that should definitely happen. The first fight was very close. There still needs to be clarity on who was the better man between the two. A lot of debate on who really won that fight. You can't go wrong with either way. Who you thought? If you say it's Billy Joe Saunders, if you say it's Chris Eubank Jr., it was that type of fight. It was that close. So Eubank Jr. has his plans set in motion. He's going to have a showcase bout. Then he's probably going to have a quick turnaround in August, and then we'll look for a big fight at the end of the year. And they hope it will be against Triple G, and they hope that Eddie Hearn can deliver that fight to them, because if he can, then perhaps the Eubanks will be interested in a long-term agreement with Matchroom Boxing. So a lot is on the line for a lot of parties involved. Now, there was one more interesting aspect about the press conference the Eubanks had earlier today, and they mentioned an old rivalry, an old rival that's currently campaigning in the super middleweight division, and I'm talking about James Degale. Now, the story, little backstory between Eubank Jr. and James Degale. They have a little history together. About a few years ago, Chris Eubank Jr., who was a young pup at the time, a prospect, was on the come up, only had 10 fights at the time. He visited Degale's gym, and according to Eubank Jr., he trashed him in sparring, beat the shit out of him, embarrassed him in front of Degale's dad and his stablemates. Beat him up so bad that Degale was so angry and butthurt after the sparring session that instead of being a good sportsman and shaking Chris Eubank Jr.'s hand, giving him props, he told him to get the fuck out of his gym. Now, the Eubank Jr. hasn't forgotten that incident a few years ago, in a sparring session at Degale's gym. He wants revenge. He felt disrespected. He said he would usually not reveal this type of info about trashing another named fighter in sparring, but that Degale was too disrespectful, didn't acknowledge Eubank Jr.'s ass whooping of him, and didn't give him any props or show any good sportsmanship, and instead kicked the Eubanks out of his gym after Eubank Jr. trashed him in his own ring in his own gym. Now, Degale has disputed the sparring session rumors, trying to say that Eubank Jr. is full of shit, that he's crazy, that he showed levels in that sparring session. Shit he usually says. That he took him to school, gave him a boxing lesson in that sparring session. I don't believe that shit for one bit. I mean, Degale is so full of himself. Thinks he's an actual legend in the sport. He's really a legend in his own mind. Has a strap, but he still has a lot to prove. Thinks he's the shit because he got a decision over an inactive and overrated Andre Durrell and went life and death with Porky Medina. Arguably lost the fight, but somehow says he schooled him in that fight as well. So I tend to believe Chris Eubank Jr. about his experience with Degale in that sparring session, that they went 8 rounds and that he beat the shit out of Degale, embarrassed him in front of all his stablemates and his own father. And now Degale's tight, has claimed otherwise, has stated that it was the other way around, that he schooled Eubank Jr. But the plan is, if Eubank Jr. can fulfill on his quest, his goal to take over the middleweight division, he will eventually move up to the super middleweight division, and he will want to fight his rival, James Degale, in order to set the record straight and prove to the public that he was the better man then and that he is the better man now. But y'all let me know what y'all think. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.